The morning sun cast golden rays across the sprawling Whitmore estate, its magnificence a stark contrast to the darkness that lurked within its walls. Clara Mendez stood at the kitchen sink, her swollen belly pressing against the counter as she scrubbed the breakfast dishes. At 7 months pregnant, every task had become a monumental effort, yet she dared not slow her pace. Madame Victoria Whitmore tolerated nothing less than perfection. Clara had worked at the estate for 3 years, arriving as a hopeful 19-year-old from a small village where opportunities were as scarce as rainfall in summer. The job advertisement had promised fair wages and decent working conditions. What it failed to mention was the cruel disposition of the woman who ruled the household with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. Victoria Whitmore was a woman of 52, preserved by expensive treatments and bitter determination. Her husband, Charles Whitmore, had built his fortune in real estate development before his untimely death 5 years prior, leaving Victoria with more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes and a heart that had calcified long before his passing. She surrounded herself with fine things and treated her staff as lesser beings, creatures meant to serve without complaint, without needs, without humanity. The estate employed 12 staff members, but the turnover was constant. Most couldn't endure Madame Whitmore's verbal lashings for more than a few months. Clara had stayed because she had nowhere else to go and mouths to feed back home. Her mother was ill, her younger siblings needed school fees, and the money she sent each month kept her family afloat. She endured because survival demanded it. When Clara had discovered her pregnancy 6 months ago, terror had seized her heart. She knew Madame would be furious, viewing the pregnancy as an inconvenience, a disruption to her perfectly ordered household. The father, a man named Daniel who worked as a driver for a neighboring estate, had promised to stand by her. But his employers had transferred him to their property in another city, and communication had become sporadic. Clara felt abandoned, though Daniel's letters assured her he was working to save money for their future. She hadn't told Madame about the pregnancy until it became impossible to hide. The reaction had been volcanic. Victoria had screamed that Clara was ungrateful, irresponsible, and a burden. She threatened termination but ultimately decided that training a new maid was too bothersome. Instead, she kept Clara on with reduced wages, claiming the deduction covered the inconvenience of her condition. The other staff members watched with sympathetic eyes but fearful hearts. Head housekeeper Margaret, a woman of 60 who had served the estate for 2 decades, occasionally slipped Clara extra food or allowed her brief rests when Madame wasn't watching. But open defiance was impossible. Victoria Whitmore had connections everywhere, and a bad reference from her meant unemployment throughout the entire region. As Clara dried the last dish, she heard the sharp click of heels on marble. Her stomach tightened, and she instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly. Victoria Whitmore entered the kitchen like a storm gathering on the horizon. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, her makeup immaculate, her designer dress worth more than Clara would earn in 2 years. Behind her cold blue eyes lived something calculating and cruel, something that seemed to derive pleasure from the suffering of those she deemed beneath her. "Clara," Victoria said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that fooled no one. "I noticed a spot on the dining room chandelier this morning. Would you care to explain how such incompetence is possible?" Clara kept her eyes downcast, a survival strategy she had perfected. "I apologize, madam. I will clean it immediately." "You certainly will. But first, I want to understand how someone I pay good money to, far more than you deserve, cannot complete basic tasks." Victoria circled Clara slowly, her heels clicking a menacing rhythm. "Is it because you're too busy growing fat with your mistake?" The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Her baby was not a mistake. Her baby was the one light in her dark existence, the hope that kept her waking each morning. But she said nothing, knowing any defense would only prolong the torment. "Look at me when I speak to you," Victoria commanded. Clara raised her eyes reluctantly. What she saw in Victoria's face was pure contempt, the disdain of someone who had never known hunger or fear or desperation. "You people come here thinking you can take advantage of my generosity," Victoria continued. You get pregnant, expect me to accommodate your carelessness, and then can't even keep a chandelier clean. If I didn't need someone to do the work, you'd be on the streets where you belong. Clara felt tears threatening, but forced them back. Crying would be seen as weakness, and Victoria exploited weakness with predatory efficiency. I asked you a question, Victoria snapped, though Clara couldn't recall any question being asked. Are you stupid as well as lazy?
No, madam.
I apologize. It won't happen again. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Clara could smell her expensive perfume, a scent that had become synonymous with fear in Clara's mind. You're right. It won't. Because the next time I find any evidence of your incompetence, there will be consequences you won't soon forget. She turned and walked toward the door before pausing to deliver one final blow. And do something about your appearance. You look like a cow that's wandered in from the fields. It's disgusting. After Victoria left, Clara allowed herself a single tear before wiping it away. She had work to do. She always had work to do. The baby kicked inside her, a reminder of why she endured, why she would continue to endure until something changed. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her weathered face etched with concern. Come, child. Sit for a moment. She's gone to her morning tea. I have to clean the chandelier. It can wait 5 minutes. Margaret guided Clara to a chair, pressing a glass of water into her hands. This cannot continue. You need to leave this place. And go where, Margaret? With what money? I have nothing. Margaret had no answer, only sorrow in her eyes. That night, in her small room in the servants' quarters, Clara allowed herself to remember. Memory was a dangerous indulgence, but sometimes the heart demanded its due. She lay on her narrow bed, one hand resting on her belly, and let her mind drift back to how she had arrived at this moment. She had grown up in a village where poverty was the constant companion of every family. Her father had worked in the fields until his back gave out, after which he spent his days in quiet pain, watching his children struggle to fill the void his disability had created. Her mother took in laundry and mending, working her fingers raw for coins that barely covered food. Clara, as the eldest of 4 children, understood from a young age that her destiny was to sacrifice so others might survive. Education had been a luxury, snatched in moments between chores. She had attended school when she could, learning to read and write, dreaming of something more. But dreams were expensive, and by 16, she had left school to work. First at a local shop, then at a small hotel, each job a stepping stone that led nowhere but forward into more work. The Whitmore position had seemed like salvation. The wage was substantial by village standards, enough to send money home regularly, while keeping a little for herself. The estate was beautiful, the work manageable at first. Victoria Whitmore had even seemed reasonable in the beginning, demanding but not cruel. It was only after several months that Clara began to see the truth, to understand that Victoria's apparent civility was merely a mask she wore in public. Behind closed doors, Victoria revealed herself. The criticisms came first, sharp and constant. Then the insults, degrading comments about Clara's background, her intelligence, her worth as a human being. Then the punishments, extra work, denied meals, wages withheld for imaginary infractions. Clara had watched other staff members leave, one by one, driven away by Victoria's treatment. But Clara had stayed because her family depended on her. Then came Daniel. He worked for the Hartley family at the neighboring estate, driving their cars and maintaining their vehicles. They met at a market in town, a chance encounter that blossomed into something beautiful. Daniel was kind and gentle, with warm brown eyes that looked at Clara as if she were precious. For the first time in years, she felt like more than a servant, more than a source of income for her family. She felt like a woman worthy of love. Their relationship had been conducted in stolen moments, evening walks when duties allowed, whispered conversations at the market, occasional precious hours when their schedules aligned. When Clara discovered she was pregnant, Daniel had been overjoyed. He spoke of marriage, of building a life together, of rescuing her from the Whitmore estate. But then his employers had transferred him, and distance had transformed promises into hopes, hopes into uncertainties. His letters came less frequently now. Clara wanted to believe he would return, but doubt gnawed at her in the dark hours of night. The baby moved again, and Clara whispered to her unborn child, "Whatever happens, I will protect you. I promise." The weeks that followed brought an escalation that Clara had not anticipated. Victoria's cruelty, previously confined to verbal abuse and degrading tasks, began to take on a more physical dimension. It started with small things: a shove when Clara didn't move quickly enough, a slap on the back of her head when she made a minor error, fingers gripping her arm hard enough to leave bruises. Clara told no one. Who would believe a pregnant servant over one of the wealthiest women in the region? And even if they believed her, what could they do? Victoria Whitmore was untouchable, protected by her money, her connections, her position in society. Clara was nothing, a name on a payroll that could be erased without consequence. The other servants saw the bruises, but said nothing directly. Margaret pressed ice wrapped in cloth into Clara's hands when Victoria wasn't looking. The gardener, old Thomas, began timing his work near the kitchen windows, a silent witness whose presence seemed to temper Victoria's worst impulses when she noticed him watching. But Victoria was cunning. She learned to time her attacks for when no witnesses were present, for moments when Clara was alone and vulnerable. She seemed to derive particular satisfaction from Clara's pregnancy, from the vulnerability it represented. "You think that baby will save you?" Victoria hissed one afternoon, cornering Clara in the pantry. "You think someone will come rescue you? No one cares about women like you. You'll end up alone on the streets, and that baby will grow up just as worthless as its mother." Clara tried to move past her, but Victoria blocked the way. "Please, madam. I have work to do." "You have work when I say you have work." Victoria's hand shot out, grabbing Clara's chin, forcing her to meet those cold eyes. "You exist because I allow you to exist. Remember that." She released Clara with a dismissive shove that sent her stumbling against the shelves. Canned goods clattered to the floor, and Clara's hand flew to her belly, ensuring the baby was undisturbed. "Clean that up," Victoria said, already walking away. "And it's coming out of your wages." That night, Clara wrote to Daniel, the letter stained with tears she couldn't fully control. She told him everything: the abuse, the fear, the desperate hope that he would come for her as he had promised. She posted the letter the next morning, watching it disappear into the mailbox like a prayer cast into an uncertain universe. 2 weeks passed with no response. Clara began to lose hope. Perhaps he had found someone else. Perhaps his promises had been as insubstantial as morning mist. Perhaps she truly was alone. The incident that changed everything occurred on a gray morning in late autumn. Clara had been cleaning the upstairs windows when a wave of dizziness overtook her. Pregnancy had made her tired, and Madame had reduced her food portions as punishment for some imagined slight. She steadied herself against the windowsill, waiting for the world to stop spinning. Victoria found her there, leaning against the wall, one hand braced for support. "What is this?" Victoria demanded. "I'm not paying you to stand around." "I apologize, madam. I felt faint for a moment. I'll continue immediately." "Faint? How convenient. Every time there's work to be done, you develop some ailment." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you need motivation." What happened next would be seared into Clara's memory forever. Victoria grabbed her by the arm, pulling her away from the window with enough force that Clara lost her balance. She fell to her knees, trying to protect her belly, but Victoria wasn't finished. "Get up," Victoria ordered, her voice cold and terrible. "Get up and work. Please, madam, the baby. The baby, the baby. I'm sick of hearing about that baby." Victoria's hand connected with Clara's face, the slap echoing through the hallway. "You use that pregnancy as an excuse for everything." "Well, I've had enough." Clara tried to rise, but Victoria grabbed a handful of her hair, yanking her upward. Pain exploded across Clara's scalp, and she cried out, unable to contain it. "Stop your noise," Victoria commanded, her grip tightening. You bring this on yourself with your laziness, your incompetence. The beating that followed was methodical, calculated to cause pain without leaving obvious marks. Slaps, pinches, hair pulling, kicks to the legs as Clara curled on the floor, trying desperately to protect her unborn child. Victoria's face was twisted with rage, decades of bitterness and cruelty unleashed on the most vulnerable target available. Finally, mercifully, it ended. Victoria stood over Clara's trembling form, slightly breathless, adjusting her perfect hair. Clean yourself up. You have 30 minutes to finish those windows, or this will seem like a gentle warning. After she left, Clara lay on the floor, sobbing silently. Her body ached in a dozen places, but worse was the terror for her baby. She couldn't feel any cramping, any sign that something was wrong, but how could she know for certain? Margaret found her there, her face going pale at the sight. Without a word, she helped Clara to her feet, guided her to the servants' quarters, and tended to her injuries with gentle hands and tears in her eyes. "This has to end," Margaret whispered. "She'll kill you and that child." Clara had no response. She was beyond words, beyond hope, existing only in a fog of pain and despair. A week after the beating, a letter arrived. Clara recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately, her heart racing as she tore open the envelope. His words were urgent, concerned, loving. He had received her letter after a delay caused by his employer's travel schedule. He was horrified by what she had endured. He was coming. "I've saved enough money," he wrote. "I'm coming for you. Tell no one. I'll arrive on Saturday. We'll leave together, you, me, and our baby. We'll start fresh somewhere Victoria Whitmore will never find us. Be ready, my love. Your suffering is nearly over." Clara read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word. Saturday was 4 days away. She just had to survive 4 more days. After months of isolation and fear, the promise of rescue filled her with something she had almost forgotten: hope. She hid the letter beneath her mattress, sharing its contents with no one, not even Margaret. The fewer people who knew, the less chance of Victoria finding out. She went about her duties with renewed determination, enduring Victoria's continued cruelty with the knowledge that it was temporary, that freedom was approaching like dawn after the darkest night. But 4 days was a long time in that house. Victoria seemed to sense a change in Clara, a subtle shift in her demeanor that irritated her. Where Clara had once been defeated, broken, she now moved with quiet purpose. It was barely perceptible, but Victoria noticed everything. "You seem different," Victoria observed on Thursday evening, circling Clara in the kitchen. "What's changed?" "Nothing, madam. I'm merely focused on my work." "Don't lie to me." Victoria's eyes searched Clara's face. "You're hiding something." "I can always tell when servants are hiding something." Clara kept her expression neutral, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. "I have nothing to hide, madam." Victoria studied her for a long moment before dismissing her with a wave.
Go.
"But know that I'm watching you. I'm always watching." That night, Clara barely slept. 2 more days. Just 2 more days. Saturday arrived wrapped in morning fog, the estate grounds obscured by white mist that seemed fitting for a day of change. Clara had hidden a small bag beneath her bed containing her few precious possessions: her mother's photograph, the letters from Daniel, a small amount of money she had managed to save despite Victoria's constant deductions. She went about her morning duties with studied normalcy, though her heart hammered against her ribs with every passing hour. Daniel had said he would arrive at noon, meeting her at the back gate where the servants came and went. By afternoon she would be free. The thought was almost too beautiful to believe. At 11 o'clock, Victoria summoned her to the parlor. Clara's blood ran cold, but she had no choice but to respond. She found Victoria seated in her usual chair, a cup of tea in her hand, her expression unreadable. "Close the door," Victoria commanded. Clara obeyed, her palms sweating. "I received an interesting phone call this morning," Victoria began, her voice conversational, almost pleasant. "From my friend Helen Hartley. Do you know what she told me?" Clara's world tilted. The Hartleys, Daniel's employers. She mentioned that their former driver, Daniel something or other, had given notice. Said he was moving away. Apparently, he has a girlfriend somewhere who's pregnant. Victoria smiled, a predator's smile. Isn't that remarkable? Clara couldn't speak.
Couldn't breathe.
So, I made some inquiries, Victoria continued. It seems your Daniel is on his way here. How touching. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could scheme behind my back? Madam, please. Silence. Victoria set down her teacup with careful precision. You ungrateful wretch. I gave you a job, a place to live, and this is how you repay me? By plotting to abandon your responsibilities? By having your lover sneak around my estate? She rose, approaching Clara with measured steps. Well, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to go out there and tell Daniel that you've changed your mind. Tell him to leave and never come back. Then you're going to return here and accept your punishment for this betrayal.
No.
The word escaped Clara before she could stop it, perhaps the first time she had ever refused Victoria directly. Victoria's face contorted with rage. What did you say? I said no. Clara's voice trembled but held. I'm leaving. You can't stop me. The blow came without warning, Victoria's hand connecting with Clara's face with enough force to send her stumbling. But this time Clara didn't fall. She caught herself on a chair, her hand pressed to her stinging cheek. You dare defy me? Victoria screamed. You're nothing. You're nobody. She grabbed a vase from a nearby table and hurled it at Clara, who barely dodged in time. The crystal shattered against the wall. At that moment, the parlor doors burst open. Daniel stood in the doorway, his chest heaving from running, his eyes taking in the scene. Victoria with her face twisted in rage, Clara with a red mark blooming on her cheek, broken crystals scattered across the floor. Clara. He rushed to her side, placing himself between her and Victoria. Are you hurt? Is the baby? How dare you enter my home? Victoria screamed. Get out before I call the police. Call them. Daniel's voice was calm but hard as steel. He turned to face Victoria fully. Call them and explain why your pregnant servant has bruises on her arms. Call them and explain what I just walked in on. Victoria faltered, momentarily caught off guard by his defiance. She was accustomed to servants who cowered, who submitted. This man was looking at her like she was the one who should be afraid. Clara has told me everything, Daniel continued. The beatings, the abuse, the conditions you forced her to work in while carrying our child. Did you think there would be no consequences? Consequences? Victoria laughed, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. I'm Victoria Whitmore. Do you know what that name means in this region? I could have both of you blacklisted. You'd never work again. Perhaps. Daniel took Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. But we'd be alive. We'd be free. And you would have to live with what you've done. What I've done? I gave this girl employment when no one else would have her. I've been more than generous. Generous? Clara's voice surprised everyone, including herself.
You starved me. You beat me.
You called my baby a mistake. You're a monster, and everyone's too afraid to say it. The room fell silent. Clara had never spoken like this before, never dared to articulate the truth that had festered inside her for so long. Now that the words were out, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Victoria's composure cracked. Her face reddened, her hands shook. For a moment, she looked old and small, stripped of the power she wielded like a weapon. Get out, she whispered. Both of you. Get out of my house. Gladly. Daniel put his arm around Clara, guiding her toward the door. But this isn't over. I have photographs of Clara's bruises. I have letters documenting months of abuse. If you try to harm us, if you try to prevent Clara from finding work elsewhere, this all goes public. Your precious reputation will be destroyed. Victoria said nothing, her face ashen. Clara paused at the doorway, looking back at the woman who had tormented her for so long. I hope you find peace, madam. But I don't think you ever will. They walked out together, leaving Victoria Whitmore alone in her parlor, surrounded by broken crystal and broken pride. The weeks that followed Clara's departure from the Whitmore estate were filled with adjustment and healing. Daniel had found them a small apartment in a town far from Victoria's reach, a modest place with clean walls and windows that let in abundant sunlight. After the darkness of her former life, Clara found herself marveling at simple things: meals eaten without fear, sleep uninterrupted by dread, days unmarked by cruelty. Her body healed faster than her mind. The physical bruises faded within weeks, but the psychological scars ran deeper. She woke sometimes from nightmares where Victoria's voice hissed in her ear, where hands grabbed and struck and degraded. Daniel held her through those nights, patient and loving, never pressing her to move faster than she was able. They married in a simple ceremony at the local courthouse with Margaret, who had quit the estate the day after Clara left, as their witness. Clara wore a second-hand dress that Daniel had found at a charity shop, and she had never felt more beautiful. When she looked into his eyes during their vows, she saw a future that was uncertain but full of possibility, a far cry from the hopeless existence she had known. News reached them occasionally of what was happening back at the Whitmore estate. Margaret, who stayed in touch through letters, reported that Victoria had become increasingly isolated. Staff members continued to leave, emboldened perhaps by Clara's example. Rumors circulated about the true nature of Victoria's household, whispered stories that tarnished the reputation she had so carefully cultivated. But Clara found that she thought of Victoria less and less as time passed. The woman who had loomed so large in her life, who had seemed so powerful and terrifying, was fading into memory, becoming smaller with each passing day. Clara had more important things to focus on: preparing for her baby's arrival, building a life with Daniel, reconnecting with her family through long phone calls that left her smiling. Her mother wept when Clara told her the full truth of what she had endured. "You should have told me," she said. "I would have found a way to help." "There was nothing you could have done," Clara replied gently. "But it's over now. I'm safe." 2 months after leaving the estate, Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Hope, a tribute to what had sustained Clara through her darkest hours. As she held her baby for the first time, feeling the weight of new life in her arms, Clara understood that everything she had endured had led to this moment. The suffering had not been meaningless. It had forged her into someone strong enough to protect this precious child. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, his eyes bright with tears. "Just like her mother." Clara smiled, pressing a kiss to Hope's forehead. "She'll never know that kind of cruelty," she vowed. "I'll make sure of it." A year passed, and Clara's life bore little resemblance to what it had been. She and Daniel had moved to a larger apartment as his mechanic business grew. He had opened his own small shop, repairing cars and building a reputation for honest work and fair prices. Clara helped with the bookkeeping when Hope allowed, learning new skills that made her feel capable and valued. Hope was a cheerful baby who seemed to have inherited her father's warm eyes and her mother's quiet strength. Clara devoted herself to motherhood with the same determination she had once applied to survival, finding joy in every milestone, every smile, every small hand reaching for hers. Margaret visited regularly, having found work at a nearby hotel that treated its employees with dignity. She had become like family, the grandmother figure that Hope would have in absence of distance from Clara's biological parents. Their friendship, forged in the fires of shared adversity, had deepened into something unbreakable. One afternoon, Margaret brought unexpected news. "Victoria Whitmore is selling the estate," she said, settling into a chair while Clara poured tea. "Word is she's moving abroad. Apparently, she can't show her face in society anymore. Too many people know the truth now." Clara absorbed this information without the satisfaction she might once have expected. "I don't wish her ill," she said finally. "I just want her far away from us. She'll be an ocean away, and you'll never have to think of her again." Clara nodded, lifting Hope from her playmat. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for her mother's face with chubby fingers. In this moment, in this small apartment filled with love and safety, Victoria Whitmore seemed like a figure from another lifetime, a nightmare that had ended upon waking. That evening, Daniel came home with flowers, a habit he had maintained since their earliest days together. They had dinner as a family, Hope in her high chair making a mess of her pureed vegetables, laughter echoing off the walls. Afterward, they sat on the small balcony, watching the sun set over the rooftops. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked quietly. "Staying at that place as long as you did?" Clara considered the question. "I regret the suffering," she said. "But without it, I might never have found you. I might never have had hope. So perhaps everything happened as it needed to." Daniel took her hand, and they sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Clara had learned that life rarely follows the paths we expect. It twists and turns through darkness and light, through cruelty and kindness, through despair and hope. She had survived the darkness, had found her way to the light, and now she held her future in her arms. A daughter who would grow up knowing only love, a husband who had proven his devotion, a community of friends who had become family. The past was behind her. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of promise. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Clara was not afraid.